The American Civil War was fought over slavery, and it ended in 1865 when the Union defeated the Confederates. Once the war came to a close, the 13th Amendment was ratified, and slavery was abolished throughout America. Though the Confederacy surrendered over 150 years ago, monuments and statues to Confederate soldiers and leaders still exist across America. One such statue of Confederate Commander Robert E. Lee served as the catalyst for the deadly white nationalist march in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017. Similar monuments exist across the country, primarily in southern states that were once loyal to the Confederacy. One city where such statues used to stand was New Orleans, Louisiana. That was until former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landrieu spearheaded their removal.
There are 3,000 or so Confederate statues that touched the ground in America. They were mostly put up well after the Civil War ended and through the Jim Crow era. Some of them were put up as late as the 1950s and 60s. The four particular ones in New Orleans was a monument, actually, that revered the Ku Klux Klan. The other three were Confederate generals, P.T. Beauregard, Jefferson Davis, who, as you know, was the president of the Confederacy, and Robert E. Lee, who was the general that attempted to destroy the United States of America in the Civil War over the issue of slavery. And Robert E. Lee really was never from New Orleans, didn't spend a lot of time there. I'm not sure he ever stepped foot there. And the city of New Orleans was never really a Confederate town. So it just seemed weird and out of context once you started to think about it, why there was a massive statue to him in reverence in the most public circle, in the most important spot in the city of New Orleans. If you came to the city of New Orleans and you didn't know any different, you would have thought that we loved him and that he was important to us. And the truth of the matter is he was not.
That's Landrieu, who wrote a book on the topic of racist monuments in America and his journey to remove them from New Orleans in his book, In the Shadow of Statues, A White Southerner Confronts History.
The history of the statues in New Orleans is a long one that many people have talked about for a very, very long time. Before I got there, a number of different mayors tried to take them down and couldn't. I wasn't focused on them in my first 4 years as mayor because I was rebuilding the city. As you know, it was destroyed by Katrina, so we were rebuilding our hospitals, our schools, our playgrounds, our rec centers. But as I began to prepare the city to celebrate our 300th anniversary, which was in 2018, in 2014, I had a conversation with Wynton Marsalis, who is, the world knows, is one of the greatest trumpet players of all time, who is my childhood friend, who said to me that you should take those monuments down, that they don't reflect who we are as a people, and that Louis Armstrong left the city because of them. And I said, well, why would I do that? He goes, well, have you ever thought about it from my perspective? And I said, no, I didn't. He goes, well, would you please? Because those monuments are a reflection that I am not welcome here. And, of course, that struck me.
Landrieu says he was struck by the fact that he had never given the statues much thought because he himself was the son of an anti-segregationist. That was when he says he really began to confront what Confederate monuments truly represent.
Whether it's blackface, whether it's statues, whether it's the criminal justice system, whether it's voter suppression, whether it's Jim Crow laws, separate but equal, slavery. These are all, seeds of the same poisonous tree of hatred and dehumanization. We continue in America to be an evolving nation on race. And now the issue of the Confederate monuments as a symbol of that is part of that discussion. And so in our ongoing attempt at racial reconciliation in the country, which, by the way, we're not particularly good at, the issue of the monuments is one of the many things that we have to deal with. And I would encourage mayors and clerics and coaches and neighborhood leaders to talk about the impact of this with their friends so that their friends can wake them up to what it is that's troubling them. It took my friend, who was African-American, to slap me in the back of the head and say, listen, that thing right there bothers me. You may not think about it from your perspective, but if you think about it from my perspective, then it's important. And if I'm equal to you, why should I have to walk by that thing and hear a message every day that I don't deserve to be here? This city's just as much mine as it is yours. Why doesn't that tell the whole history? If you're going to put that Confederate monument up and talk about the Confederate generals, why don't you talk about my ancestors who were raped and pillaged and terrorized and ripped apart from their families so that we can have a discussion about who we really are as Americans? And, of course, he's right about that. And the truth is that when most Americans really begin to understand this and think about it, I'm fairly confident that they will do the same thing, and then we will put these in the proper places and in proper context.
As a result of his reflection on the issue in 2015, Landrieu called for the statues to be removed. That began a passionate process that took a long time to finally result in their actual removal.
We did it the way the law required us to do it, in an open democratic process, in a debate that was transparent. It took a long time. We had 4 public hearings. The executive action that I took was decided into law. It was appealed to the courts, and that's the way you do things in a democracy. It was a heated debate. There are lots of people who were not from New Orleans that came to New Orleans to try to tell the people of New Orleans what they should do with their property, which is not appropriate, but they're entitled to their opinion. Secondly, the statues are down now, and so I think it's a very good thing. But I think these things take time. History doesn't make itself in a year or 2 years. It happens over time. And this was a step in the direction of the people of New Orleans declaring that our public spaces are open for everybody and that everybody is welcome in the city.
But it wasn't all smooth sailing to get to that point. Landry says New Orleans saw several white nationalist protests come to their city in protest to the decision.
I'm very thankful that nobody got hurt in our city, and I owe that to our police chief and to our security folks who did 2 things simultaneously: protected the First Amendment rights of all of the protesters, and there were many on both sides, while simultaneously making sure that everybody was safe and secure. Secondly, we got roundly criticized for taking down 3 of the statues at night because people said we were afraid for people to know. No, we weren't afraid for people to know. We were afraid for people's safety, and we took them down at the urging of security personnel because there were imminent and dangerous threats. People really teased us a lot about that. And then Charlottesville happened. And then they began to wake up to the notion that we were in a very, very dangerous time. And I would just say to the people of America, look, you can be conservative if you want, you can be liberal if you want, but you got to be peaceful. You have to argue your case. And by the way, being conservative is not the same thing as being racist. And being liberal is not the same thing as being socialist. There's a lot of room for us to have a really robust civic debate, but there is no room in America for white nationalism and white supremacy, where one race thinks that they're superior to another, or one religion thinks they're superior to another. We all come to the table of democracy as equals. That is the rule of how we play that game. And when we're not playing that game, we got to call each other out on it.
Though the racist statues were removed from New Orleans, Landry says the work continues for communities across the country.
The reason I wrote the book was so people could learn from my experiences of not seeing and then seeing and then trying to figure out a way to do something that I thought was correct. And, you know, the positive impact has already happened. I've had a lot of people who were against taking the monuments down for a whole bunch of different reasons who said, I read the book, I didn't understand all of that history. Now that I know the whole history, I guess this is the point, now that I understand the whole context, I actually think we're better because they're not there anymore. And, of course, this is an example of race in America. Once you understand, once you know, once you've experienced, you know, a relationship with other people who are different, what you find out is that we're all the same. Everybody puts their pants on the same way. Everybody wants a good opportunity to work. Everybody wants their kids to have a better life than they had. And everybody wants to have hope and opportunity in the future. All the other stuff is just gravy. And we're better by learning more about other people who are different from us because we take the good things that they have and leave the bad behind. That's why diversity is a strength, not a weakness.
And ultimately, that is why Landry says he's optimistic, despite the contentious point that our politics have reached.
Don't walk by this, that we actually work really, really well together, urban and rural. And red states and blue states, people are constantly interacting. You're at the ballpark, you're at the barbecue, you're at the cleaners, you're at the store, you're at your kids' plays. Go walk through an airport and look at how multicultural we all are and how well we get along with each other. The national discourse is not good right now, and our discipline is not good on the national discourse. But it doesn't belie the fact that in America, in small counties and in big cities, we rely on each other and work each other every day. And what we need to see is that. See what's in front of you and affirm that, and then see what's over there and reject that and say that's really not who we are. And when we exercise ourselves that way, we're going to call our leaders and our faith leaders and our community leaders and ourselves into communion about how we actually have to look at each other and see each other as fellow human beings.
Former New Orleans Mayor Mitch Landry's book, In the Shadow of Statues, is available now. For more information on all of our guests, visit our site, viewpointsonline.net. You can find an archive of past programs there and on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm Gary Price.
The American Wind Energy Association's just released annual report shows that wind powers America in more ways than one. Nationwide, wind power supplies nearly 7% of all electricity, enough to power 26 million homes. And in 5 Midwestern states plus Maine, wind energy delivers more than 20% of the power. The wind industry is a major economic driver, too, according to Association CEO Tom Kiernan.
That's especially true in rural areas. Each year, the industry pays nearly $800 million in state and local taxes and nearly $300 million to private landowners. Wind projects installed last year represent more than $12 billion in new private investment, supporting more than 500 U.S. factories and 114,000 American jobs.
In the near term, wind power is set to grow by 36%. That will increase U.S. wind power capacity to more than 131,000 megawatts, enough to power more than 42 million American homes.
What are you going to do with your old car? You can try selling it, you could junk it, or you can donate it to Heritage for the Blind. Your car will be towed away for free, and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-835-1478. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats. It doesn't matter if your vehicle runs or not. It will be towed away for free, and you'll be supporting those that need help. Heritage for the Blind is a nonprofit organization that helps the visually impaired live fuller lives. Call right now to donate your car, and as a special thank you, you'll receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to over 50 locations. Call Heritage for the Blind right now. Call 1-800-835-1478. Donating is easy, and your vehicle is towed away for free. Plus, you'll get a free vacation voucher for donating. Call now, 1-800-835-1478. That's 1-800-835-1478.
And that's Viewpoints for this week. Viewpoints is a production of MediaTrax Communications. You can follow us on Twitter and Facebook to learn about upcoming shows and find a library of past programs on iTunes. Plus, you'll always find podcasts of our segments and information about our guests at viewpointsonline.net. Join us again next week for your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.